Hi dear students, today we are starting with a new module, that is working capital management. Working capital management is also known as liquidity decision, or in other words it is short term asset mix decision, because we are dealing with the decision on usage of current assets and current liabilities. Okay, then we can go through a meaning. Working capital is that part of a firm's capital which is required for financing short term or current assets. Examples like cash, marketable securities, debtors, inventories, etc. Okay, so working capital management is the management of working capital. That is, working capital is that part of firm's capital which is required for financing short term or current assets. It is also called revolving capital. Working capital is also called revolving capital, circulating capital, etc. Okay, these are another names for working capital, that is revolving capital, circulating capital. Okay, then we know there are two types of capitals, that is fixed capital, working capital. We know fixed capital is the capital required for creating production facilities through purchase of fixed assets. Generally we are using our fixed capital for purchase of fixed assets or for creating the production facilities. Secondly, working capital, it is the capital required for carrying out day-to-day operations. Okay, then this is definitions. Shubin has defined working capital as: working capital is the amount of fund necessary to cover the cost of operating an enterprise. Okay, so it is the capital required for covering the cost of operating the enterprise. Okay, secondly, Justenberg has defined working capital as: circulating capital means current assets of a company that are changed in the ordinary course of business from one form to another form. For example, from cash to inventory, inventory to receivables, receivables to cash. ഓക്കെ, ഇങ്ങനെ വ്യത്യസ്ത ഫോമുകളിലേക്ക് കൺവേർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന കറണ്ട് അസറ്റുകളെയാണ് നമ്മൾ സർക്കുലേറ്റിംഗ് ക്യാപിറ്റൽ എന്ന് ഇവിടെ ഡിഫൈൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, then there are different concepts of working capital. The first concept is narrow sense. In narrow sense, working capital means cash. And second concept is operating circle or circular concept. Operating circle concept or circular concept. Working capital means the amount invested in the elements of operating cycle. We know there are different elements of operating cycle. Operating cycle means the cycle of converting cash into cash. That means cash, raw materials, work in progress, finished goods, sales, account receivable, again cash. This is a circle. We will go through operating cycle in detail here. Okay, so operating cycle concept says the amount invested, different elements of operating cycle. Mainly the elements of operating cycle are cash, inventories, receivables. Okay, so the amount invested in stock and receivables, it is called operating cycle concept, working capital. The next third concept is balance sheet concept. Balance sheet concept says, first concept, gross concept. In case of gross concept, working capital means total current assets. And second one is net concept. Net concept may be common concept and alternative concept. Common concept, working capital means current assets minus current liabilities. And in alternate concept, working capital means current assets financed by long-term fund. There are two sources of financing current assets. That means we can invest in current assets by using long-term fund and short-term fund. The current assets financed by long-term fund is called working capital as per alternate concept. So we have gone through narrow sense, operating cycle concept, balance sheet concept. In balance sheet concept, gross concept and net concept. Okay, net working capital is the qualitative working capital. Net working capital means is current assets minus current liability. This is a common concept. Generally, we will use the term current assets minus current liabilities for net working capital. So it is the qualitative working capital. Sources of working capital, we have already gone through that. Two sources of working capital, that is long-term sources. We can finance working capital by using long-term sources for just like issue of share, issue of debenture. These are long-term sources. These sources can be used for financing working capital. So it may be long-term source and also short-term source. The elements of working capital includes cash, inventories and receivables. Okay. Then classification of working capital. Firstly, on the basis of concepts, there are two types of working capital, that is gross working capital and net working capital. We have already gone through that. Gross working capital means total of current assets. Net working capital means total current assets minus total current liabilities. And the second classification is on the basis of time. On the basis of time, working capital is classified as permanent working capital and temporary working capital. Permanent working capital or fixed working capital is again classified. First one, regular working capital. Regular working capital means it is the working capital required regularly for doing day-to-day operations. And second one is reserve working capital. It is a working capital not used regularly. It is reserved to be used in case of any special need, in case of contingencies. And second one, temporary or variable working capital. It will not be regularly used. It is temporary. It is temporarily arranged, and it includes seasonal working capital, special working capital. Seasonal working capital means it is used in special seasons. There may be off season, on season, etc. for a different business. So in seasons, for example, for some industries, raw material may be available only in some seasons. For some industries, production may be very high in some seasons. So in that time only they will require seasonal working capital. And the last one is special working capital. It is the working capital required for special purpose only. It will be required only in special situations. Okay. This is also the same classification on the basis of concept, on the basis of time. Gross working capital, net working capital. On the basis of time, permanent and temporary. Permanent is classified as regular and reserve, and temporary is classified as seasonal or special. Okay. Then elements of working capital. Working capital management. In case of working capital management, the financial manager has to go through these areas. First one is cash management. He has to manage the cash effectively. This will be discussed here in detail. And second one is inventory management. Material management, inventory management is another important part. Third one, receivables management. He has to manage account receivable, debtors, etc. Okay. And last one is short-term financing. The next area is dimensions of working capital management. At the time of managing working capital, the financial manager has to go through these important areas. First one, liquidity, risk and profitability. He has to manage between these three areas. We know if there is high liquidity means he is maintaining adequate cash or excess cash, there may be lesser profit and also risk will be lesser. If he is maintaining low liquidity position, he is not maintaining adequate cash, adequate working capital, what will be the situation? There may be very high risk. At the same time, his profit will be higher. because excessive cash balance will be lesser. A financial manager has to balance, he has to keep a proper balance between these three areas: liquidity, risk, and profitability. The second dimension is composition of current assets. If he is investing a particular amount in current assets, he has to decide how much is to be invested in cash, how much in receivables, how much in inventories. He has to keep a proper balance between these three elements. And next one is composition of current liabilities. He has to balance between the elements of current liabilities, just like creditors, bills payable, account payable, etc. These are the dimensions of working capital management. Then we know working capital means current assets minus current liabilities. So the elements of working capital are elements of current assets and elements of current liabilities. Current assets, we need not discuss this area. I know you are well aware of these elements, but for the sake of the content, we are going through cash in hand, bills receivable, debtors, short-term loans and advances, inventories, temporary investments, prepaid expense, etc. Okay, and the current liabilities are also given here. Then we are discussing one more topic, that is objectives of working capital management. First one, purchase of raw materials, components and spares. Working capital is required because he has to purchase raw materials, components, spares, etc. Secondly, to pay wages and salaries. Third, to incur day-to-day expenses. Fourth one, to meet selling costs. Then next, to provide credit facilities to the customers. And lastly, to maintain adequate inventories. Okay, thank you very much.